which features should I include in my MVP? All right, if you've ever wondered this while planning your app, you're not alone. Most founders actually do struggle with this question because it feels like every feature is important. Should I add this AI feature, these advanced analytics, right? It's really, really hard at the beginning before you have any context to make the right choice. But the truth is, the more features you include, the harder it becomes to launch, gather feedback, and pivot quickly. So how do you decide which features to include? That's exactly what we'll be diving into today. Firstly, how to define the right features for your MVP, why less is more when building your first version, and real-world examples of successful startups that have nailed this approach. By the end of this video, my goal is for you to know how to strip down your idea to its essential components and build the MVP that gives you the best chance of success. But before we get into that, if you're new here, I'm sure you're wondering who I am and how do I know what I'm talking about. My name is Timothy John Uzebu. I'm the co-founder of Bedmore Technologies. We specialize in helping non-technical, self-funded founders turn their ideas into real functional software products. Over the years, we've worked with founders from all sorts of different industries, from healthcare, real estate, marketing, logistics, and more. The apps that we've built have gone on to raise funding from investors, bring in millions in revenue, partner with companies like Microsoft, JP Morgan, and more, and serve tens of thousands of users around the world, including companies like the New York Times, Toronto Raptors, and Google. So it's safe to say that we know a thing or two about building software applications for non-technical founders. But let's jump into the video. So the purpose of an MVP. First, let's get one thing clear. An MVP is a minimum viable product, right? It isn't about building the complete and final version of what you envision your idea to be. It's about building the simplest version of the product that solves a user's problem and gets you paid, right? Let's repeat that so everyone understands, right? The MVP isn't about perfection, it's about validation. The goal here is to prove that people will pay for your solution. That is it, right? Anything beyond that, like extra features or an ultra polished design, should come after you've already validated the idea. Now, the question is, why is this the goal? You know, people sometimes think that if we're looking to go ahead and build a product, it should be perfect, world-class product out the gate. So this is a valid question, right? Why is this the goal? Again, circling back here, is because validation de-risks your entire business. If you can prove early on that your idea actually has legs in the real world before pouring money, time, and energy into a full-scale application, you're building smarter and you're building more strategically. Number one is because validation saves you time. Spending months or even years building a full product only to discover that no one wants to use it is every founder's worst nightmare, right? And MVP helps you to avoid this by getting real-world feedback as quickly as possible. Two is validation minimizes your financial risk, right? Similarly with time, capital is very, very precious when it comes to starting a software startup, right? Developing software is expensive. Even nowadays with AI and what's been trending in that industry, it's still extremely expensive. The longer you spend developing without testing your ideas, the more you're gambling on your resources. But on the other hand, if you're only launching an MVP, you'll just be investing in what's necessary to test your idea. If it works, great, you can go ahead and scale that. If it doesn't, you saved yourself from wasting tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on a product that would have failed anyway. Number three is that validation makes it easier to attract investors and stakeholders. When you can show proof that people are already paying for your solution, it becomes much easier to get buy-in from others because they're not taking as big as a gamble on your company, on your app, right? Whether that's investors, partners, early adopters, users, you name it, it's easier for people to jump in once they already see that others are doing the same. Investors care about traction and not ideas. They want to see that you have reduced their risk by validating that your solution has demand already, and you've already captured a subset of that demand. And that's where an MVP comes in. It helps you provide this proof before asking for funding. But now that we understand the why, let's jump into the how and understand how to rely on hard data to understand which features you should build in your MVP. Number one is to understand and identify your core value proposition. So first and foremost, start by asking yourself these questions. What problem does my app solve, right? What problem does my software, my product solve? Question number two is, what is the one feature that solves that problem, right? It may not be one, maybe two, maybe three, maybe four. The number itself is irrelevant. The question really is, what is the minimum effective dose needed to solve that very specific and particular problem for my users, right? So let's just jump into a simple framework with a couple examples to help explain that. Number one, of course, is to define the problem. Let's go for an example. Actually, an app that I had built out previously. Small e-commerce sellers were struggling to manage their inventory across multiple platforms, leading to lost sales and overselling. As you see here, This is actually a platform that I built in 2021, 2022 for this exact purpose. Number two is defining the solution, right? A tool that syncs inventory in real time across Amazon, Depop, Shopify, and whichever other platforms the seller is selling on. Three is identifying the must-have features, right? So of course, if this is the problem we're trying to solve here, right? Small e-commerce sellers struggling to manage their inventory across multiple platforms, that is the singular most important feature that we need to tackle. Could be something like this, right? A real-time inventory tracker that automatically updates stock levels across all connected platforms. And that is exactly what I actually ended up building out with this platform. It ended up connecting individuals to their Depop accounts and helped to automatically track and sync their inventory across their storefront and across their web page there. With this, the most important part is actually just to filter out the nice to haves. The thing is, this is unfortunately where a lot of first-time founders in particular struggle, right? Because it's very easy, especially before we commit to building, before we have to talk to any users or investors, extremely easy at this point to get attached to things like, ultra fancy, UI, UX design, artificial intelligence features, and integration with other tools. But unless those features are absolutely 100% necessary for solving the core problem, they are distractions, right? Another thing to remember is that every extra feature adds development time and increases the cost, which goes hand in hand with delaying your launch and making it less capital efficient to go ahead and launch this software. So again, let's just jump into a couple real world examples to really solidify this strategy. Firstly, we'll talk about Spotify. When Spotify first launched, it didn't include all the features that we associate with the platform today, right? Curated playlists, podcasts, social sharing. Their original MVP was laser focused on solving their one core problem that they identified with their users, and that's how to stream music effortlessly and seamlessly. So here's what they included. First is a library of licensed songs. Of course, if you're looking to stream music, you need to have the songs on the platform. Two is a user-friendly search and play function. And number three was the minimal buffering for a smooth listening experience, right? That's it. They didn't have everything else that you see today. So by prioritizing the must-have features, letting users instantly play music without downloading files, Spotify validated their idea quickly and disrupted the music industry thusly, right? Because they were able to go ahead and launch so quickly without having to have all the cumbersome and hard to manage and, all the different things that they see today. They didn't need that to go to market as fast as possible. Number two is WhatsApp. WhatsApp had a very similar strategy with their MVP. Of course, nowadays, if you go on WhatsApp on your phone, the app includes, video calls, group chats, and even payment services. But in the beginning, it had one goal, which was to allow people to send free text messages over the internet, right? Their MVP included contact-based messaging system, real-time delivery notifications, and a very, very bare bones interface focused solely on the functionality. That was it. That was all they included. They didn't have multimedia sharing, group chats, anything like that in its early days. Now, once they saw traction, they added in more features over time, which led them to grow to the multi-billion platform that they are today. But both Spotify and WhatsApp started with this one thing in mind, which is solving their users' most present problems with a single core feature. And of course, you should adopt the same strategy and do the same. Now, step three is to focus on revenue driving features. What do I mean by that? We'll break that down in a second here. The most important golden rule is only include features that directly contribute to users getting you paid. If a feature does not help a user to solve their problem to a level that would get them to pay you, it does not belong in your MVP. Now, that's not to say that we can't bring it on later, we can't develop it later, but for the MVP, keeping with the spirit of what an MVP actually is, that feature does not belong here quite yet. Now, let's demonstrate this by using our earlier example. For the must-have features that must be present in order to solve this problem, first and foremost is real-time inventory syncing, right? Automatically updating stock levels across connected platforms every time a sale is made. Of course, without this, the tool doesn't even solve the core issue. And then from there, we have to have the platform connections and the actual dashboard for stock tracking. Now, with this, like we say dashboard, that doesn't have to be a super fancy, high-end with great design. That could just be an Excel sheet, right? Let's say, for example, we have this hooked up to a Google spreadsheet. Even that solves the problem to a very similar level, and people are willing to pay for that, right? without having to be the craziest, looking feature imaginable as far as the design. Now, going back to what I said earlier, it's easy for people to understand which features are the must to have. What's difficult is for founders, especially first time non-technical founders, to disinclude the nice to have features, right? So some nice to have features for this example might be sales reporting, automated restocking notifications, and advanced analytics and trends, right? Of course, these are all features that are a value add, right? You can't sit here and tell me that these wouldn't be nice to have in the platform. However, when it comes to building the MVP, we have to be very, very critical and very, very conservative when it comes to which features we want to include and which features we want to commit to. Looking at another real world example, let's talk about HubSpot. Founders focus on solving one core problem for small to medium businesses, right? Generating and managing leads efficiently. So their MVP included these three things, right? Lead capture forms, basic, very, very basic analytics, and email integration. That was it. They didn't have the advanced CRM tools, no complex workflows, and not the extensive reporting that they have now, right? This allowed them to focus to validate its core value proposition, which was helping small businesses generate and nurture leads without overcomplicating the product. Now, once they gained the initial traction, they then began to add additional features, which helped them to scale to the powerhouse platform it is today with a market cap of over $37 billion. Now, once we've committed to this initial subset of features, we need to commit to gathering feedback as early and as often as humanly possible. Now, as far as some common mistakes, one thing that I see very often, right? I even had a call with an individual this morning that had an idea for an application in the augmented reality space. They were thinking about building a certain subset of features for one type of individual and a certain subset of features for a different market completely. And what I told him is that, yeah, you can definitely go ahead and do that, but what that does is it makes the messaging less clear. It makes it harder to understand what variables we're testing for. It makes it more engineering intensive to develop, right? These are all things that sure can be done, but when it comes to really keeping to that spirit of an MVP and minimizing our risk, we want to make sure that we're not building for everybody, right? We want to make sure that we're talking to a very specific target audience with a very specific problem so that we're able to track and iterate as efficiently as possible, right? Think of it like having a science experiment. You have your reactants, you have your chemicals. The more chemicals like you pour into that beaker, the harder it is to understand which particular solution, right, which particular combination was responsible for that reaction, right? So we want to keep it as streamlined, as minimalistic as possible in the beginning. And that goes into the other two common mistakes, right? Polishing the product too much and overbuilding it with too many features. These go hand in hand. You don't want to spend too much time polishing what someone may not even want to use down the road, right? Keep it as bare bones as possible. Obviously, make it look functional, right? Keep it up to the standards as far as what industry you're in, but you don't want to overcommit to doing that in the beginning. Of course, when it comes to an MVP, less is always more, right? Your job is to answer one question and one question only. Will people pay for this? And so you're able to do that and launch faster, gather feedback sooner, and be in a better position to pivot and grow as fast as you possibly can without investing hundreds of thousands of dollars to do so. So if this has been valuable to you, check out some more of our content on our channel. And also, if you have an idea and you're struggling to figure out which features are must-have and nice to have, you can definitely go ahead and check out more of our content or scroll down to the description box, click the link and book a call to speak with our team. We'd love to walk you through our process and how we help founders go ahead and figure that out and also parlay that information into building their actual MVP.